Transmigrated as a disabled protagonist, how should I continue the script? Chapter 13, The True Mortal World. That evening, Tezuka Osamu no longer had any intention of returning to the port mafia. Seeing that he hadn't gone to the bandits' den, Yakimaru was no longer worried about his safety. At the same time, a strange thought popped into his mind: could the heroine of Dororo be a descendant of bandits? That would explain why she could maintain such a pure heart during chaotic times and why the villains didn't kill her. Focusing on the wrong person, following the wrong path, Yakimaru had guessed the heroine's background in the original story. This possibility left Yakimaru feeling uneasy. It wasn't that he hated Dororo's background. One cannot choose where they are born. What he hated was the inability to determine danger. Anyone with a life flame that emitted a red glow, he would never approach. Whether the red glow was tainted or pure, as long as someone had killed before, it meant that they weren't someone easily judged. Such people posed a significant threat to Yakimaru's safety. He couldn't see the faces of those with malicious intent, and he couldn't hear the lies they spoke, but that didn't mean he wouldn't be harmed by them. In times of chaos, how many people can truly be trusted? Only you. After leaving my adoptive father, I won't let anyone harm your life flame. Yakimaru had always been quietly watching Tezuka Osamu. Tezuka could feel it. Ever since they had exchanged names, this person hardly ever looked at anyone else. He quietly stayed by his side, without causing any annoyance. How obedient. Tezuka Osamu couldn't help but smile faintly. At the hotel front desk, the receptionist was registering their information, secretly glancing at Tezuka Osamu and Yakimaru. The two with bandages wrapped around them were a sight that left her deeply puzzled. Did they get into a car accident together? One had their body wrapped up tightly, but not so much their limbs, leaving a delicate face exposed. The other had their limbs and neck completely wrapped, covering even a third of their charmingly handsome face with annoying bandages. While being scrutinized, this one even deliberately sent a teasing glance her way. The receptionist wanted to cover her heart, which was racing, flustered by being flirted with by someone not even as tall as her. This sister is 28 this year. How am I not 18 anymore? We would like a room with 2 beds, on one of the lower floors of the 5-story hotel. Tezuka Osamu made the request, openly, as Yakimaru held his hand while subtly flirting with the receptionist. Very well, please wait a moment. The receptionist carefully selected a suitable room for him. Yakimaru couldn't see what his future girlfriend was doing, but he could see a pale white flame about 1 meter away, flickering with excitement. Next to the flame, one that desperately wanted to move forward, was the flame of Dororo, gently flickering outward in waves. Yakimaru had encountered this type of situation a few times before, usually in someone's house, and rarely in public. He didn't observe for long before being pulled away by his adoptive father. What is this person trying to do? A man? Once again, Yakimaru misjudged the gender. He took a step back, pulling Tezuka Osamu, who was leaning on the reception desk, away. Tezuka Osamu didn't notice anything wrong and asked in confusion, Yakimaru? Yakimaru raised his right hand and pointed at Dororo, who was across from him, towards the flame of life and heat. He's up to something with you. This woman doesn't seem to have any problems. I can tell, Tezuka Osamu said, unable to comprehend. His eyes moved between the two of them. If this woman were a bad person, Yakimaru wouldn't have allowed him to get close for so long, but if she were just a good person, Yakimaru wouldn't have pulled him back. After some thought, he decided to test his own theory. They couldn't possibly stay at a hotel that made Yakimaru uneasy. Tezuka Osamu's method of testing was extremely simple. He took advantage of the moment when Yakimaru wasn't prepared and reached out to touch the receptionist's hand as she was writing, quickly checking if her palm had any distinct calluses. Beautiful lady, when I grow up, how about we have coffee together? Sure. The receptionist's heart immediately blossomed with joy. This kid had such a sweet tongue, far better than those overly greasy young men. But then, she saw Tezuka Osamu suddenly pulled into a stumble, embraced from behind by another young man. Under the lights, Yakimaru, with his dull gray-brown pupils, looked directly at her. There was a kind of tangible killing intent within him. Ha 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 ha. In stark contrast, Tezuka Osamu burst out laughing, clutching his stomach, the cheerful and refreshing voice of a young man echoing throughout the hotel lobby, even startling those secretly monitoring him. After his laughter subsided, Tezuka Osamu paid no mind to the stares of others, and upon receiving the room key, he blew a kiss. Looks like there's no chance this time, see you around. Still in his school years and already flirting, he dragged Yakimaru away. In the elevator, Yakimaru was unusually sulking because Dororo not only refused to hold hands but also wouldn't let him hug, maintaining a distance from him like a hedgehog. Tezuka Osamu scolded him, "You can't just go around hugging another man. A 14-year-old boy." When they reached the 5th floor, Tezuka Osamu stepped out of the elevator, only to realize Yakimaru hadn't followed. He stood there, looking pitifully like a child scolded into a corner, with his long, thin limbs, wearing oversized clothes that couldn't hide his frail frame. Tezuka Osamu could only rush back to the elevator before the doors closed and drag him out. "Catch up." Yakimaru once again grabbed his hand. Their fingers almost intertwined, but failed. Why didn't Dororo leave any space between his fingers for him? At night, in the hotel room, Tezuka Osamu wasn't asleep, just dozing off. After bathing, Yakimaru knelt on the bed next to him, using a towel to dry his messy hair. This gave a subtle softness to his otherwise emotionless face, yet more than beauty, there was a much stronger sense of a puppet devoid of consciousness. The two had never shared a bed together, and if you had to give a reason, it was simply that he didn't like it, strongly rejecting the idea. Tezuka Osamu refused any intimate contact with anyone. A brief moment of novelty might be acceptable, but over time, don't even think about it. Conveniently, he had observed Yakimaru's true nature, just a small misguidance, and the other would take it seriously, boldly stepping into Tezuka Osamu's personal space without hesitation. "Yakimaru, don't get it wrong. I'm not yours, you're my puppet, got it?" Tezuka Osamu had waited for quite a while, but there was no sign of the port mafia making a move, leaving him visibly annoyed and displeased. Explosions and flames make a perfect pair, yet the night didn't even give him the fireworks he had hoped for. Yakimaru paused his towel drying, slowly turning to look over, only to find Tezuka Osamu jumping up, leaping off the bed, and rushing to turn on the computer to search for something. As the sound of the keyboard click-clacked, Tezuka Osamu pulled up a lot of publicly available information on the armed detective agency in Yokohama, further pinpointing the agency's location. An entire agency of ability users, how interesting. That person who saw right through me and Yakimaru at a glance, is he a famous detective known to the police? Could his ability be related to his detective work? My ability is no longer human. What about Yakimaru's? Tezuka Osamu, full of curiosity, wasn't the least bit tired, pondering a made-up ability for him. The Eye of the Soul. An ability that can see life forces. Teenagers always have boundless imagination and energy, but Yakimaru, having calculated today's active hours, realized that normal people need rest, and so he went to drag the night owl Tezuka Osamu to bed. The air conditioning was cold enough, and Tezuka Osamu bundled himself tightly under the blankets, revealing only his head. His dark hair spread out, and his face, which was so captivating to women, had shed the liveliness of the day, now calm and expressionless. "Good night, Yakimaru." Yakimaru scanned the room, confirming the safety of the surroundings, before entering a state of sleep. In his heart, he softly whispered, "Good night." Good night, the only small light left in the darkness of his world. After a calm night, the next morning, Tezuka Osamu immediately sat up to take a call. His connection with Mori Ogai wasn't one that could easily be severed. Knowing more about the intelligence within the port mafia would benefit both him and Yakimaru, helping them survive in this city without the need to flee elsewhere. They haven't come after us yet. I see, so they intend to frame Mori-san. Dazai Osamu was referring to the recent string of assassination events. If it weren't for Yakimaru's presence, he wouldn't have been so fearless about sneaking out, he would have long been assassinated by some elite killer. Although getting shot and killed wouldn't be bad, dying before reaching the goal, where's the fun in that? Today, the plan was to visit the armed detective agency to get to the bottom of things. He turned his head to look at Yakimaru, who had just gotten out of bed. Yakimaru had changed back into that old black outfit, patched and worn. The white patterns on it were of unknown meaning. Dazai had researched many Japanese family crests but couldn't find a match. Instead, it somewhat resembled a design of an unidentified plant. "I'll be careful, that's that." Dazai Osamu cut off the call before the other party could finish. To Mori Ogai, Dazai being dead had its advantages, but his continued existence also had benefits. Either way, it was a win-win situation. Dazai Osamu quickly dashed over and yanked off the blanket, leaving Yakimaru confused and fumbling around to figure out where the blanket had gone. Dazai Osamu, delighted, thought, daily teasing of Yakimaru, 1/1. Dororo, good morning. Hurry and get up. The energetic Dazai Osamu had already finished washing his face and pushed Yakimaru towards the bathroom, taking the initiative to squeeze toothpaste onto the toothbrush and hand it to Yakimaru. After that, Dazai Osamu avoided watching the toothbrushing process in the mirror and went outside. Yakimaru. Dazai Osamu assumed that Yakimaru's adoptive father, Jukai, had surely taught him these things. But did Jukai ever bother with a toothbrush? Always accustomed to using water to clean his mouth, the ancient living Yakimaru stood in front of the mirror with a toothbrush in his right hand and a cup of water in his left, looking somewhat adorably confused. He hesitated for a long time, moved aside part of his mask, and then, holding the unfamiliar object, put it in his mouth and chewed it up, followed by drinking a cup of tap water. Is this breakfast? No, it's absolutely not. No one's breakfast is toothpaste. When Dazai Osamu rushed over to check, he discovered bite marks on the toothbrush, leaving him momentarily speechless. How have you survived this long? He looked at the chewed-up toothbrush, feeling incredibly disappointed in the supposed adult and silently cursing, Yakimaru, the person who raised you was completely irresponsible, they didn't even teach you how to brush your teeth. Yakimaru. Forget it, let's just leave it at that. In the end, Dazai Osamu's urge to educate was defeated by that face in front of him. The reality of life. It wasn't that he lacked the willpower, it was that Yakimaru's face was just too overwhelmingly disarming, making it impossible for him to confront the situation. Chapter 13 End.